raw fiction.
The ticking was the first thing I noticed when I woke up, and the last thing I heard before sleep took me. It wasn't a sound. It was a texture. A rhythmic layering of brass teeth biting into steel pinions. The heartbeat of 300 mechanical children resting on the drying racks of the vain atelier. To anyone else, the workshop was silent. To me, it was a choir. I was 34 years old, and my hands were already worth more than the building we stood in. This was Geneva, where the air smells of old money and cold lakes. But inside the atelier, the air was scrubbed, filtered, and pressurized. We lived in a hermetic seal. That was the rule. No dust, no humidity, no chaos. I sat at the bench, the high-intensity lamps casting a surgical halo over the Vane Caliber 9. It was my masterpiece. 5 years of math, 3 years of prototyping, and 2 years of failing until the oscillation was perfect. My brother, Lucas, burst through the double doors, bringing the chaotic world in with him. The pressure in the room shifted. I felt it in my ears before I saw him. Lucas was 32, 2 years my junior, but he occupied space like a man who owned the very atoms around him. He wore a suit that cost more than my car, cut sharp enough to draw blood. "We have the meeting," he announced, his voice booming over the delicate tick-tick-tick of the room. He didn't whisper. Lucas never whispered. I didn't look up immediately. I was setting a ruby bearing into the main plate. My breathing was shallow, controlled. My pulse was artificially lowered, a trick I'd learned to keep my fingers from trembling under 10x magnification. "Silas," he said, closer now. I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and ambition. "I'm setting the jewel, Luke. Give me 6 seconds. He waited. I could feel him vibrating. Lucas had an internal frequency that was constantly accelerating, a balance wheel spinning too fast, always on the verge of banking. I exhaled, slotted the ruby home with a microscopic click that only I felt, and finally looked up. "The Japanese investors?" I asked. "Better. The consortium." Lucas leaned against my workbench, careful not to touch the sterile mats. He reached up and adjusted the silk tie at his throat. Then, instinctively, he turned his head to catch his reflection in the polished chrome of the ultrasonic cleaner. He did it every time he entered a room. A quick tilt of the chin, a check of the teeth, a verification that the mask was still glued on tight. "They're coming tomorrow," he said, turning back to me, his eyes bright with the manic energy of a closer. "If they sign, Silas, we're not just a boutique heritage brand anymore. We're global. We're going to be the new Patek." "I don't need to be Patek," I said, picking up my tweezers again. "I just need the new CNC machine you promised me. You'll get 10 of them. You'll get a whole wing. But I need everything perfect. The prototype?" I pointed to the velvet tray. The Caliber 9 sat there, a skeletonized beauty of rhodium and gold. It was the culmination of the Vane legacy. Our father had been a good watchmaker, but he was a traditionalist. He played the standards. I had written a new symphony. Lucas looked at it, but he didn't really see it. He saw the projected revenue. He saw the zero-gravity tourbillon as a marketing hook, not a triumph against physics. "Gorgeous," he murmured. He reached for the loop that hung around his neck on a leather cord. It was a heavy piece, silver-cased, engraved with our family crest. I had made it for him when he officially took over the business side. It was a symbol. We see the same things. He held it up, but he didn't bring it to his eye. He just rubbed the silver casing with his thumb, a nervous tick. The glass was pristine, not a smudge, not a scratch. In 3 years, I don't think he had ever actually used it to look at a movement. "I need the specs for the presentation," he said. "The narrative. I sent you the technical sheet on Monday. No, not the math. The soul, Silas. I need the romance. Why does it beat? Why does it matter?" I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. It matters because it doesn't lose a second in 10 years, Lucas. It matters because it's true. Truth is boring, he smiled, flashing those white teeth. Romance sells. I'll draft something. Just keep this baby safe. Tomorrow is the big day. He clapped me on the shoulder, a jarring, heavy impact that made me wince and breezed out. He checked his reflection in the glass door panel as he exited. I was left alone with the ticking. I felt safe. I felt needed. We were a binary star system. I was the dense, gravity-heavy core, and he was the bright, shining corona. It worked. I didn't want to talk to investors. I didn't want to wear suits. I wanted to make time behave. The glitch happened at 4 p.m. It wasn't a catastrophic failure. It wasn't a mainspring snapping. It was a piece of paper. The courier arrived at the service entrance. Usually, packages went to the front office, to Lucas or his assistant, but the front desk was unmanned. Lucas had taken the staff out for a pre-celebration lunch. The buzzer screamed in the quiet atelier, startling me so badly I dropped a bridge screw, irritated. I went to the door. Delivery for Vane, the courier grunted, shoving a digital pad at me. Printer proofs, rush job. I signed for it. It was a heavy box, taped shut with the branding of a high-end luxury print shop in Zurich. I carried it back to my bench, intending to just leave it for Lucas. But curiosity is a mechanic's vice. I wanted to see how they had photographed the watch. Lighting metal is difficult. If you get the angles wrong, the finishing looks flat. I wanted to make sure they hadn't butchered the beveling I'd spent 600 hours perfecting. I sliced the tape. The smell of fresh ink and gloss varnish wafted out. Inside were 20 copies of the Vane Heritage Prospectus. Hardcover, leather-bound, gold-foiled, expensive. This was the document Lucas would hand to the billionaires tomorrow. I wiped my hands on my apron to ensure no oil would transfer to the pages. I opened the first copy. The photography was stunning. Macro shots of the gear train that made the metal look like a cathedral. I felt a swell of pride. This was my work, my life. I turned the page to the section titled, The Architect of Time. There was a full-page portrait of Lucas. He was leaning over a workbench, my workbench. He was holding a pair of tweezers, peering intently at a movement. The lighting was dramatic, making him look like a brooding genius. I frowned. I remembered that photo shoot. He'd posed for 5 minutes, joking that he didn't know which end of the tweezers to hold. I read the text. For Lucas Vane, the Caliber 9 was not just an engineering challenge. It was an obsession. I dreamt the escapement structure, Lucas explains. I woke up one night with the geometry of the hairspring burning in my mind. I knew the industry said it was impossible, but I couldn't accept the limitations of the past. My stomach gave a strange, wet lurch. I read it again. I dreamt the escapement structure. I lowered the book to the bench. The room felt suddenly hot. The air filtration system seemed to hum louder, a low drone drilling into my temples. That wasn't true. Lucas didn't dream geometry. Lucas dreamt of accolades. I was the one who solved the escapement issue. I did it on a rainy Tuesday in November, eating cold takeout, drawing diagrams on the back of a napkin because my notebook was full. I remembered running into his office, shaking, showing him the math. He had looked at it, confused, and asked, "Does this mean we can launch by Christmas?" I turned the page. The patent-pending mechanism, invented by Lucas Vane, represents a quantum leap in horology, invented by Lucas Vane. My name was nowhere in the text. I flipped to the back, checking the credits, the team page. Nothing. Just a small line at the very bottom, in size 8 font. Production Supervisor, Silas Vane. Production Supervisor. That was a job for a man who watched conveyor belts. That was a job for a man who checked boxes. It wasn't the title of a creator. My hand started to shake. It was a subtle tremor, the kind that ruins a watchmaker's career. I clenched my fist to stop it. A cold sweat broke out on my lower back. Why? Why lie about this? The investors didn't care who invented it. As long as the family owned the IP, we were partners. 50-50. That was the deal since Dad died. I sat there for a long time, the heavy book open like a dead bird on my pristine mat. I felt a sense of violation that was physical, like someone had reached into my chest and rearranged my ribs. He was wearing my hours. He was wearing my sleepless nights like a costume. The door buzzer sounded again. It was Lucas returning. I heard his laughter before I saw him. He was on the phone. Absolutely. The narrative is bulletproof. Yes, I'll see you at dinner. He hung up as he walked in, tossing his keys on the side table. He saw me standing there. He saw the open box. For a split second, less than a heartbeat, his face changed. The charm evaporated. His eyes went flat, dead, assessing the threat. It was a look I had never seen before, or perhaps I had just never been looking for it. Then, the mask clicked back into place. Ah, the proofs! He walked over, beaming. Aren't they magnificent? Look at that embossing. He didn't look at me. He looked at the book. Lucas, I said. My voice sounded rusty, foreign to my own ears. I read the copy. Great, isn't it? The copywriter is a genius. Really captures the mystique. It says you invented the caliber 9. Lucas paused. He picked up the book and flipped it shut, smoothing the leather cover with an affectionate stroke. He turned to me, his expression softening into something resembling pity. Silas, he said, his voice dropping to that reasonable, soothing register he used with difficult clients. It's a pitch deck. It's storytelling. It's a lie, I said. You didn't design the escapement. You don't even know how it works. Lucas sighed, a sound of immense patience. He walked around the bench and put a hand on my shoulder. I flinched, my muscles seizing up under his palm. Look, he said gently. I know. We know. But these investors, they don't want a committee. They don't want the Vane brothers and their support staff. They want a Steve Jobs. They want a singular visionary. It's simpler. It's cleaner. You erased me, I whispered. I protected you, he corrected firmly. You hate the spotlight, see? You hate the dinners, the press, the questions. You want to be in here, in your cave, making magic. If I put your name on the patent, they'll drag you onto stages in Tokyo and New York. They'll want you to explain the math. He squeezed my shoulder. I'm taking the heat for you. I'm playing the character so you don't have to. I'm the lightning rod. You're the storm. That's how we work. I looked at him. His blue eyes were clear, earnest. He believed it, or he was acting so well that the belief didn't matter. I looked down at my hands. He was right about one thing. I hated the spotlight. The thought of explaining the escapement to a room full of bankers made me nauseous. I just wanted to build, and if Lucas took the credit, did it really change the work? The watch was still perfect. The oscillation was still true. The money would still go into the joint account. It's just for the pitch? I asked. Just for the pitch, Lucas promised. Once the check clears, we can correct the record in the technical journals. But for the money guys, we give them the simple story, the genius brother, and his legacy. He smiled, a dazzling, confident smile that reflected off the chrome surfaces of the lab. We're a team, see? I sell the dream. You make it real. Don't get hung up on the ego stuff. We're building an empire. He checked his watch, a prototype I had built for him. I have to change for the pre-dinner. Lock up the proofs, will you? Don't want any leaks. He patted my cheek, a gesture that felt patronizingly affectionate, and walked out. I stood there in the silence. The ticking returned, filling the void he left behind. I looked at the book. The Architect of Time. It made sense. Logically, it made sense. Marketing was a game of simplification. Complicated stories didn't sell luxury goods. He was streamlining the brand. He was doing his job, which was to secure the funding that would let me do my job. I was overreacting. I was letting my ego get in the way of the business. It was a harmless simplification, a clerical sleight of hand to close the deal. Lucas wouldn't betray me. He was my brother. We were the Vane boys. I closed the box and shoved it under the bench. I sat back down at the microscope and adjusted the eyepieces. I focused on the balance wheel of the caliber 9. It swung back and forth, a perfect, hypnotic rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. Everything was in order. Everything was synchronized. I picked up the tweezers and went back to work, forcing my breathing to match the beat of the machine. It was just a brochure. It didn't mean anything. The brochure from the printer's box had been a hairline fracture in a sapphire crystal, visible only if you caught the light just right, but structurally compromising. I had polished over it. I had applied the paste of denial and buffed it until the surface looked smooth again. For 2 weeks, we operated in the grind time. The Japanese investors came and went. The consortium meetings were endless loops of catered lunches and closed-door laughter. I stayed in the atelier, head down, buried in the microscopic topography of the caliber 9. But the rhythm was off. I started noticing the syncopation in the mundane. When Lucas typed on his phone, he angled the screen away. Not casually, but tactically. A 45-degree tilt, the reflex of a card shark protecting a hand. When he left the room, he didn't just close his laptop. He engaged a biometric lock that required a thumbprint and a retina scan. Paranoia, I told myself. He's protecting the IP. He's protecting us. But my body didn't believe it. My stomach was a knot of cold wire. Every time he smiled at me, that blinding, perfect, mirrored surface smile, I felt a phantom pressure in my chest, like the heavy atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I needed materials. The caliber 9 prototypes were consuming our stock of grade 5 titanium faster than anticipated, and the mainspring alloy was running low. I put in a requisition order through Lucas's assistant. It was bounced back 3 hours later, pending approval. I walked to the front office. "Luke, I need the titanium." He didn't look up from his tablet. "Cash flow is tight until the deal signs next week, see? Use the grade 2 for the mock-ups. Grade 2 has a different tensile strength. It changes the weight distribution. I can't balance a tourbillon on guesswork. Improvise," he said, finally flashing me a grin. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were checking the reflection in the black screen of his iPad. "You're the genius mechanic. Make it work." I went back to my bench, but my hands refused to steady. Improvise. We were a company valued at 40 million francs, and I was being told to improvise on the flagship product because of cash flow? I took my coat. I needed air. I needed truth. I drove to the industrial district, the gritty underbelly of Geneva where the postcard scenery dies and the real work happens. I pulled up to Kovic Metals. Mara Kovic was the antithesis of the Vane brand. She was 60, built like a blast furnace, with hands permanently stained by oxides and grease. She didn't wear suits. She wore blue coveralls that smelled of sulfur. She was smoking a cigarillo in the loading bay when I walked up. "The monk comes down from the mountain," she grunted, blowing smoke away from my face. "You look like hell, Silas." "I need 3 bars of grade 5, I said, skipping the pleasantries, "and a spool of Nivarox. I'll pay cash. Personal account." Mara narrowed her eyes. She dropped the cigarillo and crushed it under a steel-toed boot. "Personal account? Trouble in paradise? Just bureaucracy. Lucas is managing the liquidity." Mara laughed. It was a dry, scraping sound, like metal on stone. "Managing? Is that what they call it now?" She walked into her office, a glass box inside the warehouse, cluttered with invoices and samples. I followed. "I cut your brother off 3 months ago, Silas," she said, tapping a greasy keyboard. The world tilted slightly to the left. "What?" "Lucas. I stopped taking his POs. He wasn't paying net 30. He wasn't paying net 90. And when he did pay, it was from shell accounts in the Caymans, then Cyprus. I don't touch dirty money. I run a clean yard." "There must be a mistake," I said, the automatic defense rising up. "We have investors. We have capital." Mara turned in her swivel chair, the springs groaning. She looked at me with a pity that was far worse than Lucas's condensation. It was the pity of a professional looking at an amateur. "Silas," she said softly, "you make the best movements I've ever seen. You can make a spring breathe, but you're blind. I didn't cut him off just because of the late payments. I cut him off because he asked me to falsify the purity certificates." The air in the office suddenly felt very thin. Falsify? He wanted me to stamp grade 2 titanium as grade 5. Said it was for marketing prototypes, and nobody would know the difference. She leaned forward. "He's selling fakes, Silas. Or he's building a house of cards. Either way, I'm not supplying the bricks." I walked out of the warehouse without the metal. I drove back to the atelier in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I listened to the engine of my car, trying to diagnose a rattle that wasn't there, trying to focus on anything other than the crater opening up in my reality. Grade 2 stamped as grade 5. That wasn't marketing. That was fraud. That was a ticking time bomb in the wrist of a client. If a rotor snapped at high velocity, I arrived back at the Vane building at 8 p.m. The lights in the front office were off. Lucas's Porsche was gone. He was at the closing dinner with the consortium. I let myself in. The silence of the atelier was usually my sanctuary. Now, it felt like a tomb. I went to my bench. I tried to work. I picked up a screwdriver, but my hand was vibrating. I couldn't stop thinking about the ignorance temptation. "Go home," a voice whispered in my ear. "Order a pizza. Watch a movie. Forget what Mara said. She's bitter. She's jealous. Lucas has a plan. He always has a plan. If you pull this thread, the whole tapestry unravels. You'll lose the workshop. You'll lose the legacy." I sat there for 20 minutes, paralyzed by the safety of the lie. Then I looked at the caliber 9, my life's work. If he was putting inferior metal into this design, he wasn't just stealing my credit. He was murdering my art. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, somatic lead dragging me toward the administrative wing. I walked down the hallway. The carpet swallowed my footsteps. I reached Lucas's office door. It was locked, of course. I stared at the keypad. I didn't know the code, but I knew Lucas. I closed my eyes and listened to the memory of him entering the code this morning. Not the numbers, but the rhythm. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. It was a waltz. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Lucas was a narcissist. He didn't use random numbers. He used dates that celebrated him. I tried his birthday. Beep, 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 buzz. Red light. I tried the date Dad died, the day he became CEO. Beep, 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 buzz. Red light. I paused. I thought about the mirror check. He looked at himself constantly. He was obsessed with the new identity he was crafting, the architect of time. I tried the date of the press release for the Caliber 9 launch, the day he claimed he dreamt the invention. 0, 9, 1, 4, 2, 3. Click. Green light. The door swung open. The office smelled of him sandalwood and ozone. It was aggressively modern, all glass and chrome. No papers on the desk, just a large, curved monitor and a single object resting on the black leather blotter. The silver loop I had engraved for him. I walked over and picked it up. It was heavy, cold. I brought it to my eye, reflexively, to inspect the surface of his desk. The glass was blurry. I frowned and wiped it with my thumb. Still blurry. I held it up to the light. It wasn't a lens. It was a piece of cheap, curved plastic. He had popped out the precision-ground sapphire lens I had gifted him and replaced it with a toy. Why? I turned the loop over. The back casing, usually screwed tight to hold the lens, was loose. I twisted it. The back fell off. Inside the casing, where the lens assembly should have been, was a tiny USB drive. He wasn't using the loop to see. He was using it to hide. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was the shadow self. The Lucas I knew wore expensive suits. This hidden drive was the dirty laundry. I sat in his chair. It was set too high, designed to make him feel tall. I plugged the drive into his computer. It didn't ask for a password. The drive itself was the key. A folder window popped up. It was organized with a precision that Lucas never showed in the workshop. Folders labeled Cayman, Shell A, Shell B, and one folder labeled Vein Solo. I moved the mouse. My hand felt numb, disconnected from my brain. I double-clicked. Inside was a single PDF document, Vein and Partners, Restructuring and Acquisition Strategy. I opened it. It wasn't a technical document. It was a legal blueprint. I scrolled past the financials, past the valuation of the patent, my patent, past the marketing projections. I stopped at Phase 3, Liability Mitigation. There was a chart, a timeline, Month 1, Acquisition of Vein Horology by LV Holdings, a shell company. Month 2, Transfer of all IP assets, including Caliber 9, to LV Holdings. Month 3, Liquidation of the Vein manufacturing entity, the Atelier. Month 4, Termination of redundant personnel. I scrolled down to the list of redundant personnel. There was only one name listed in bold. Silas Vein. Underneath my name, there were bullet points. Reasons for termination: inability to adapt to corporate structure, mental instability, history of obsession, burnout, cost prohibitive salary, and then the smoking gun. The document that stopped my breath and turned the blood in my veins to ice. Attached to the PDF was a scanned letter. It was a non-compete agreement, already drafted, waiting for a signature. But it wasn't just a non-compete. It was a assignment of rights. It stated that Silas Vein acknowledged that his contributions to the Caliber 9 were merely supervisory, and that the sole inventive concept belonged to Lucas Vein. In exchange for signing this, I would receive a severance package, 20,000 francs, the price of a used sedan. I looked at the date on the draft. It was created 6 months ago. 6 months ago, we were having Sunday dinner. 6 months ago, I was showing him the prototype, and he was hugging me, telling me we were going to change the world. He hadn't just erased me from the brochure. He had been planning to amputate me for half a year. He wasn't building a company for us. He was harvesting me. I was the crop, and the harvest was over. I looked around the office. The chrome, the leather, the view of the city. It all looked different now. It wasn't an office. It was a hunting blind. I looked back at the screen, at the words, mental instability. He was going to gaslight me. He was going to take the money, sell the company to himself, fire me, and tell the world I was crazy. The ignorance temptation died instantly. The hum of anxiety vanished, replaced by a terrible, ringing silence. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't paranoid. I was the enemy. I reached out and slowly, methodically, ejected the USB drive. I put the plastic lens back into the silver casing. I screwed it shut. I placed the loop back on the desk, exactly where I found it, aligning it with the edge of the leather blotter until it was perfectly parallel. I stood up. I felt light. The weight of the confusion was gone. The person I had been sleeping next to, figuratively, genetically, emotionally, was a stranger. No, not a stranger. A parasite, and he was coming home soon. The sun hadn't yet crested the Alps when I unlocked the atelier, but the air inside was already scrubbed and temperature controlled to a constant 23 degrees Celsius. It was the temperature of stability. I didn't turn on the main overhead banks. I worked by the light of a single bench lamp, its cone of illumination cutting a sharp circle in the gloom. I wasn't building today. I was preparing a surface. I cleaned my workbench. I removed the oil cups, the movement holders, the screwdrivers, and the tweezers. I wiped the green anti-static mat with isopropyl alcohol until the fumes stung my nose, a sharp chemical clarity. I wanted the stage to be empty. Betrayal is messy. Justice requires a clean room. I sat there for 2 hours, watching the dust motes dance in the beam of light, waiting for the sound of the Porsche. My heart rate was 64 beats per minute, steady. The panic of the previous night, the somatic crash of finding the vein solo file, had calcified into something harder, colder. I felt like a mainspring wound to its absolute limit, holding a tremendous amount of potential energy in a state of perfect stasis. At 8:45 a.m., the heavy steel door at the front of the building clanked open. Footsteps, leather soles on polished concrete. Click, click, click. The rhythm was brisk, victorious. Silas? Lucas's voice echoed through the empty workshop. He sounded bright, caffeinated, and rich. In the back, I said. My voice was low, barely rising above the hum of the HVAC system. He rounded the corner of the partition. He was wearing a navy 3-piece suit, the fabric shimmering slightly under the workshop lights. He looked like a god of commerce. His hair was perfectly coiffed, his face shaved close, his smile ready for the cameras that would be flashing at the signing ceremony in 3 hours. He was carrying 2 coffees. He held one out to me. Black, 2 sugars, the fuel of champions. I didn't take it. I didn't look at the cup. I looked at his wrist. He was wearing the prototype caliber 9. It was ticking away on his pulse, powering his lies. "I'm fine," I said. Lucas frowned slightly, the first ripple in the pond. He set the coffee down on the edge of a nearby desk, careful not to disturb the sterility of my workspace. "Suit yourself. You ready? The car is coming at 10. I need you in a tie, see? I know you hate it, but the Japanese are formal." He leaned against the partition, crossing his arms. He was checking his reflection in the glass of the fume hood behind me. The mirror check. "I have the papers here," he said, tapping the breast pocket of his jacket. "Just a few final signatures from you to authorize the IP transfer to the new holding entity. Standard stuff." Lawyers cleared it. "The new holding entity," I repeated. "LV Holdings. It's just a tax vehicle, Silas. Don't look so suspicious. It saves us about 12% on the cantonal tax. More money for your machines." He flashed the smile. The big brother smile. The one that used to make me feel safe. The one that said, "I handle the world, so you can handle the gears." "Sit down, Lucas." The command was soft, but it had an edge I had never used with him before. It wasn't a request. Lucas blinked. The smile faltered for a microsecond, then reassembled itself into an expression of amused confusion. "I don't have time to sit, see? We have a schedule. The photographer is... Sit down." I pointed to the stool on the opposite side of my workbench. The guest chair. The place where apprentices sat to be graded. Lucas stared at me. He sensed the shift in atmospheric pressure. He laughed, a short, nervous bark. Okay. Serious mode. I get it. Pre-game jitters." He pulled the stool out and sat. He smoothed his tie. He placed his hands on his knees. "What is it? Is there a problem with the movement? Did the escapement fail?" "The movement is perfect," I said. "The movement never lies. That's why I like it." I reached into the drawer of my workbench. My hand moved with the slow, hydraulic precision of a heavy machine. I didn't tremble. I withdrew the object, the silver loop. I set it gently on the center of the green mat, directly in the pool of light between us. Lucas saw it. His eyes snapped to the object. His pupils contracted. It was a physiological reaction, faster than thought. His body knew the danger before his brain could construct a defense. He stopped breathing. "I found this on your desk last night," I said. Lucas swallowed. I watched the cartilage of his throat bob up and down. He forced his shoulders to relax, forced the air back into his lungs. "Ah, right. I was looking for that. Must have left it behind when I—" He trailed off, his eyes glued to the silver casing. "It was broken," I said. "The lens was loose." Lucas's gaze shot up to mine. His eyes were wide, searching my face for the depth of my knowledge. "Was it? I hadn't noticed. I hardly use it." "I know," I said. "I noticed the weight distribution was off. It felt hollow." I picked up the loop. I held it between my thumb and forefinger, so I took it apart to fix it. The silence in the room stretched thin, a wire pulled to the breaking point. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the blood rushing in my own ears. Lucas sat very still. The charm was leaking out of him like gas from a ruptured line. His face was losing its animation. The brand director was fading. The survivor was waking up. "Silas," he said. His voice was lower now. "Warning. We have a meeting in 2 hours. Whatever you think you found." "I didn't think I found anything, Lucas. I found a USB drive." I started to unscrew the back of the loop. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The metal-on-metal sound was deafening in the quiet room. "Silas, stop. It was clever." I continued ignoring him, hiding the betrayal inside the symbol of our partnership. There's a poetic irony to it. Did you think of that, or did you just need a place to stash the backup? I removed the back. The USB drive tumbled out onto the mat with a small plastic clatter. Lucas stared at the drive. He looked at it with a mixture of hatred and longing, as if he wanted to snatch it and swallow it whole. "That's private data," he said. His voice was cold now. The warmth was gone. The brother mask was slipping, revealing the angular, sharp features of the villain underneath. "You had no right to access my personal files." "Personal?" I asked. It was labeled Vein Solo. I reached into the drawer again. This time, I pulled out the stack of papers, the printouts, the smoking gun. I held them in my hand. They felt heavy, dense with malice. I read the restructuring plan, Lucas. I read the severance agreement. 20,000 francs? For 15 years of work? "It's a draft," he snapped. He stood up, knocking the stool back. It clattered to the floor, disrupting the sanctuary. "It's a contingency plan. In business, you model every scenario." "You modeled a scenario where I am mentally unstable?" I asked calmly. I didn't stand up. I stayed seated, anchored to my bench, anchored to the truth. "You modeled a scenario where you own my patents? Where you claim you dreamt the geometry I spent 3 years calculating?" "You don't understand how this works," Lucas shouted. He began to pace, his hands flying up in frustration. "You're a mechanic, Silas. You're a grease monkey with a gift. You don't know how to talk to these people. You don't know how to scale. I did what I had to do to save the company." "To save the company," I repeated. "By cutting off the head, by cutting off the dead weight." The words hung in the air. Lucas stopped pacing. He realized what he had said. He froze, his back to me, his chest heaving. He slowly turned around. The transformation was complete. The brother I knew was gone. The man standing before me was a stranger. His face was hard, his eyes calculating, devoid of any familial softness. He looked at me, not with love, or even guilt, but with assessment. He was calculating the damage. He was looking for a leverage point. "You're a liability, Silas," he said. his voice quiet, devoid of emotion. It was the voice of the vain solo document. Clinical, legal, you're obsessive, you're slow. You refuse to compromise on materials. You would bankrupt us chasing perfection while the market moves on. I built this brand. Me. I sold the story. The story is what they're buying, not the gears. He took a step toward the desk, leaning over, his hands splayed on the edge of the mat, encroaching on my space. So, here is the reality, he hissed. The investors are coming in 2 hours. You are going to sign those papers. You are going to smile, and you are going to take the check. Or what? I asked. Or, I burn it down, he said. I own the debt. I own the client list. I own the shell companies. If you don't sign, I walk. And I leave you with a bankrupt workshop and a warehouse full of watches you can't sell. He stared at me, his eyes drilling into mine, expecting me to crumble. He expected the quiet, passive Silas. He expected the production supervisor. I looked at him. I felt a strange sense of peace. The ambiguity was gone. The glitch was resolved. I knew exactly what I was looking at. I picked up the stack of papers, the evidence of his premeditated fratricide. I lifted them high, letting the light catch the bold text of the liability mitigation header. Then, with a single, deliberate motion, I dropped them onto the table between us. Thwack! The sound was flat and final, like a gavel striking wood. You don't own the client list, Lucas, I said. And you don't own the debt. I leaned forward, matching his posture, entering his space. Because I called Marakovich this morning. The name hung in the sanitized air like smoke. Marakovich. Lucas scoffed, a sharp, incredulous sound. He took a step back, the aggression in his posture faltering just enough to reveal the hesitation underneath. Mara? He laughed, but it was brittle. The junkyard dog? What is she going to do, Silas? Throw scrap metal at me? She keeps records, Lucas. Unlike you. I reached into the folder, past the damning restructuring plan, and pulled out a second stack of documents. These were not glossy or formatted. They were photocopies of shipping manifests, stained with oil fingerprints, stapled to bank transfer receipts. You doctored the purity certificates, I said. My voice was steady, the rhythm of a metronome. You bought grade 2 titanium, stamped it as grade 5, and pocketed the difference. You moved the surplus cash into LV Holdings. I slid the papers across the desk. They fanned out, revealing the timeline of the theft. That's fraud, Lucas. It's not creative accounting. It's a felony. And since you used the Swiss banking system to launder the difference, it's federal. Lucas looked at the papers. He didn't touch them. His face went the color of ash. For the first time in his life, the reflection he saw wasn't the golden boy. It was a man standing on a trapdoor. You wouldn't, he whispered. I'm your brother. You were my brother when you drafted a plan to fire me, I said. You were my brother when you decided to sell a dangerous product to our clients just to fund your exit strategy. If one of those rotor bearings failed, it wouldn't just break the watch. It would destroy the name. Our father's name. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest, the somatic echo of the grief I had suppressed for 6 months. I let it wash over me. Then I boxed it up. There was no room for sentiment in a courtroom. The Japanese investors are not coming, I said. Lucas's head snapped up. What? I called them an hour ago. I told them we are undergoing an internal audit and restructuring. I canceled the meeting. You idiot! The mask shattered completely. Lucas lunged forward, slamming his hands on the workbench. The vibration rattled the tools, sending a tiny screw skittering across the mat. That was 40 million francs! That was our ticket! You just torched the company! I saved the company, I corrected. I burned the parasite. I picked up a pen. It was a heavy, brass fountain pen. I uncapped it. Here is the new reality, Lucas. We aren't going to court. I don't want the police in here. I don't want the vain name dragged through the tabloids. I reached into the drawer and pulled out the final document. I had drafted it myself the night before, using the template of our father's original partnership agreement, but stripped of all trust. This is a dissolution of partnership, I said. It states that you are selling your 50% share of Vein Horology to me for the sum of 1 franc. 1 franc? Lucas spat. You're insane. In exchange, I continued, overriding him, I will not hand over the fraud evidence to the prosecutor. I will absorb the debt you created. I will clean up the mess with the suppliers. And I will give you a payout of 200,000 francs from my personal savings. That is enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere that isn't Geneva. 200,000 is nothing. It's 10 times what you were going to give me, I said softly. The room went silent. The justice of the math hit him. He looked at the document, then at the door, then at me. He was running the calculations. He was looking for the angle, the charm, the lie that would get him out of this. He looked at the chrome fume hood. He checked his reflection. But the man staring back looked small, distorted. Silas, he tried, his voice trembling, reaching for that old, brotherly cadence. We can fix this. We can just reclassify the metal. We can tell the investors it was a supply chain error. We don't have to do this. The error wasn't the supply chain, Lucas. The error was thinking I could trust you with the thing I loved. I held out the pen. Sign it, or I call the police. Those are the options. There is no option C. Lucas looked at the pen. He looked at my hands. They weren't shaking. He realized, finally, that the production supervisor was gone. The sentinel was standing before him, wielding a sword crafted from paper and ink. He snatched the pen. He signed the document with a furious, jagged scrawl that tore the paper. He threw the pen down. You'll fail, he hissed, backing away. You have the personality of a dial gauge. You can't sell watches, Silas. You'll be bankrupt in a year. Maybe, I said. But they'll be my watches. He grabbed his jacket. He didn't look at me again. He didn't check his reflection on the way out. He stormed through the double doors, and for the first time, the slam didn't make me flinch. I listened to the Porsche start up outside. The engine roared an aggressive, desperate sound and then faded into the distance. I stood there in the silence. It wasn't the empty silence of before. It was a clean silence. The pressure in the room had equalized. The hermetic seal was broken, but I didn't feel exposed. I felt breathable air. I looked down at the mat. The silver loop was still there, the back unscrewed, the USB drive lying like a dead insect next to it. I picked up the loop. I walked over to the waste bin. I dropped the plastic lens and the USB drive into the trash. Then I took the silver casing, the sterling silver I had engraved with our family crest, and I put it in the crucible. I walked over to the annealing torch. I lit the flame. I watched the silver turn red, then orange, then liquid. The crest melted away. The shape dissolved. It was just metal now. Raw material. It could be anything. 6 months later. The bell above the door chimed. A soft, mechanical ting. I had tuned myself. I didn't look up immediately. I was deep in the escapement of a vintage chronograph, a restoration job for a collector in Zurich. Just a moment, I called out. Take your time. It sounds like a Valjoux 72 you're fighting with. I froze. I knew that voice. I looked up. Mara Kovic was standing in the customer area. She looked uncomfortable. She was wearing a dress, or at least a garment that wasn't coveralls. It was navy blue, stiff, and she looked like she wanted to tear it off, but she was smiling. Mara, I said, putting down my tweezers. I didn't think you came to the retail side. I don't, she grunted. Too much velvet. Makes me itch. She walked up to the counter. The showroom was different now. I had removed the black leather and the chrome. I had stripped the walls down to the original brick and opened the blinds. The sun from the lake poured in, illuminating the dust motes. Lucas would have hated it. He would have said it looked unprofessional. My clients called it authentic. "I brought you something," Mara said. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a heavy wooden box. She slid it across the glass. I opened it. Inside were 3 bars of grade 5 titanium, pure, certified, and resting on top was a spool of Nivarox's hairspring wire. "I figured you were running low," she said. "Since you actually pay your invoices now." I smiled. It was a small movement, rusty, but it felt real. "I am," I said. "Business is steady. Smaller, but steady." "Small is good," Mara said. "Small means you can see all the corners." She looked around the shop. Her eyes landed on the wall where Lucas's visionary portrait used to hang. It was gone. In its place was a framed schematic of the caliber 9. Just the math, just the truth. "Heard about your brother," she said, her voice dropping a decibel. "Oh?" "He's in Dubai. Real estate, consultancies, selling skyscrapers that haven't been built yet." "That sounds about right," I said. The name didn't trigger the somatic spike anymore. No nausea, no racing heart. Just a dull, distant recognition. Like remembering a character from a book I read a long time ago. "He'll be rich again in a year," Mara warned. "He might be," I agreed. I looked down at my hands. They were stained with oil and silver dust. They were steady. "But he won't be a watchmaker." "No," Mara said. "He never was." She tapped the glass counter with a thick, calloused finger. "I need a watch. Silas. For my nephew. Graduation gift. He's an engineer. He likes to know how things work." "I have something," I said. I reached under the counter and pulled out a velvet tray. On it sat the caliber 9. Not the prototype. The production model. I had finished it 3 months ago. It didn't have the Vane Solo branding. It didn't have the flashy tourbillon cage Lucas wanted. It was stripped back, industrial, brutalist in its elegance. I had named it the Vane Honest. Marketing suicide, Lucas would have said. We had sold out the first run in 2 weeks. Mara picked it up. She didn't look at the logo. She flipped it over and looked at the exhibition case back. She pulled a loop from her pocket, a cheap, plastic one, and peered at the balance wheel. She watched it beat. Tick, tick, tick. "Good amplitude," she muttered. "Deadbeat seconds, independent escapement," I corrected. "It isolates the energy train." She nodded, impressed. She put the watch down. "It's heavy," she said. "It's real," I replied. "I'll take it." She wrote a check. I wrapped the watch. The transaction was simple. Goods for currency. Value for value. No stories, no myths, no projections. When she left, the chime rang again. I was alone in the shop. The sun was setting over the lake, casting long shadows across the floor. I locked the front door. I walked back to the workbench. I sat down and picked up the chronograph. I adjusted the lamp. The light pooled on the metal. For years, I thought I was protecting the legacy by hiding in the back. I thought that by letting Lucas handle the world, I was keeping my hands clean. I was wrong. The watchman doesn't withdraw to quarters. He stands at the gate. I had built a wall, not a wall of stone, but a wall of paper contracts, audits, and clear boundaries. Lucas was on one side, chasing his reflections in the desert. I was on this side, with the dust and the oil and the time. I picked up my tweezers. I felt the balance of the steel in my fingers. I took a breath. The air smelled of ozone and machine oil. It smelled like home. I looked at the movement. It was out of beat, just slightly, a tiny imperfection in the rhythm. I reached in, nudged the regulator arm a fraction of a millimeter. Tick, tick, tick. Perfect. I went back to work.
Our journey ends now. If you're still here, a subscribe goes a long way for us. I've picked 2 more videos you'll love. Click over and dive in. I'll catch you in the next story. Bye for now.